For millennia, the sands of Egypt have guarded the secrets of one of the greatest civilizations in human history. Towering monuments, intricate carvings, and sacred texts whisper the tales of a people who built a society that would endure for thousands of years. But before the grand pyramids and mighty pharaohs, before the temples of Karnak and the Valley of the Kings, there was the Nile, a river that breathed life into the desert and shaped the destiny of an entire civilization. The Nile, often called the gift of the gods, dictated the rhythm of existence for those who settled along its banks. In a land dominated by arid deserts, it was the Nile that transformed Egypt into a fertile oasis. Each year the river would flood, replenishing the soil with nutrient-rich silt. These annual floods ensured abundant harvests, allowing early communities to grow and thrive. Without the Nile there would be no Egypt. The first settlements and climate change. The story of ancient Egypt does not begin with towering pyramids, but rather with the first humans who recognized the power of the river. Archaeological evidence suggests that by 6000 BCE, early settlers had established communities along the Nile. These groups, initially nomadic, gradually became more permanent as they harnessed the power of agriculture. However, climate changes also played a crucial role in the development of Egyptian society. What is now the vast and desolate Sahara Desert was once a region of savannas and lakes, teeming with life. As the climate dried, people were forced to migrate toward the Nile, where they developed irrigation techniques and created stable settlement. These environmental changes pushed humans toward permanent agriculture, further accelerating the rise of early Egyptian civilization. These early Egyptians cultivated grains, such as barley and emmer wheat. They learned to store surplus food, enabling them to sustain larger population. As settlements grew, so did their knowledge. They crafted tools from flint and copper, built homes from mud brick, and fashioned simple pottery to store water and grain. This gradual shift from a hunter-gatherer lifestyle to a structured agrarian society marked the dawn of civilization in Egypt. Upper and Lower Egypt, the two lands. Egypt was not a single unified nation in its earliest stages. Instead, it was divided into two distinct regions. Upper Egypt, stretching from modern-day Aswan in the south, to the center of the country. Lower Egypt, where the Nile spread into a vast delta before emptying into the Mediterranean Sea. These two lands developed independently, each with its own rulers, customs and symbols of power. Upper Egypt was symbolized by the white crown, while Lower Egypt was represented by the red crown. Despite their shared reliance on the Nile, Upper and Lower Egypt were often rivals. Kings emerged in both regions, and over time their ambitions led to conflicts. Around 3100 BCE, a powerful ruler sought to unite the two lands under a single crown. That ruler was Narmer, also known as Minas, the legendary founder of the first dynasty and the unifier of Egypt. The unification of Egypt, Narmer's unification of Upper and Lower Egypt, was a turning point in history. His reign marked the beginning of a centralized state with a single ruler, the pharaoh, who was seen not just as a king but as a divine being, chosen by the gods to maintain order and balance in the land. The symbol of this unity was the pshent, the double crown, combining the white crown of Upper Egypt and the red crown of Lower Egypt. This act of unification laid the foundation for a civilization that would endure for over 3,000 years. With power centralized, Egypt saw the rise of an administrative system capable of organizing massive projects, none more impressive than the building of monumental tombs and temples. The rulers of the early dynastic period, 3100 2060-86 BCE, focused on consolidating power, expanding borders and developing systems of governance that would set the precedent for all pharaohs to come. It was during this period that the first great city of Egypt, Memphis, was founded. Positioned strategically at the junction between Upper and Lower Egypt, Memphis became the heart of political and economic power. The city's walls, temples and administrative buildings signified the rise of a kingdom unlike any the world had seen before. Spiritual beliefs and the concept of Ma'at. Beyond politics and warfare, the people of early Egypt were deeply spiritual. Their understanding of life and the afterlife shaped their worldview. The gods of Egypt, Ra, Osiris, Isis and many others became central to their beliefs. Temples were erected, and rituals were performed to ensure balance in the world, a concept known as Ma'at, the guiding principle of truth, justice and cosmic harmony. With strong leadership, a flourishing economy, and a deeply rooted belief system, Egypt was ready to embark on a new era, one that would see the construction of the first pyramids, the rise of powerful pharaohs and the beginning of a legacy that would echo through time. This is where the journey of ancient Egypt truly begins. The age of pyramids and the Old Kingdom. With Egypt unified and a central government firmly in place, the land was set on a course toward one of its most defining eras, the Old Kingdom. This was a time of grand architectural achievements, the establishment of a structured society, and the solidification of the pharaoh's role as a divine ruler. At the heart of this era was the belief in the afterlife. The early rulers of Egypt sought to ensure their journey into eternity by constructing monumental tombs, structures that would protect their bodies and house the items they would need in the next world. What began as simple mud-brick tombs, known as mastabas, would soon evolve into the most iconic symbol of ancient Egypt, the pyramid. The step pyramid of Djoser, a revolutionary structure. The first great pyramid was built by King Djoser, the second ruler of the third dynasty. Seeking an eternal resting place that reflected his divine status, Djoser commissioned his chief architect, Imhotep, to design a structure unlike anything seen before. The result was the step pyramid of Saqqara, a massive, six-tiered structure that reached toward the sky. This architectural marvel marked the beginning of a new era of pyramid construction. The Great Pyramid of Khufu, engineering mastery. The fourth dynasty saw the construction of the Great Pyramid of Khufu, the largest and most famous pyramid in history. Standing at 14.6 meters, 40.81 feet, this colossal monument was built using over 2.3 million limestone blocks, each weighing several tons. How this massive structure was constructed remains one of the greatest mysteries in history. The construction of pyramids required not just physical labor but an advanced understanding of mathematics, logistics, and astronomy. The alignment of these structures with celestial bodies suggests the Egyptians had a profound. As the Old Kingdom came to an end around 21, Egypt entered a period of political fragmentation, economic instability, and weakened central authority, known as the First Intermediate Period, 21 T1 2055 BCE. This era saw the collapse of the once mighty royal administration, giving rise to independent regional rulers known as nomarchs. These provincial leaders, once subordinate to the pharaoh, now ruled their territories as if they were kings, vying for dominance over Egypt's fragmented landscape. The reasons behind this collapse were complex. Prolonged droughts led to lower Nile floods, resulting in poor harvests and widespread famine. Without the surplus food needed to sustain the state's workforce and economy, the pharaoh's influence diminished. Simultaneously, internal power struggles within the royal family, and the growing authority of local governors further eroded the central administration. The Great Pyramids, once symbols of divine power, stood as empty relics of a bygone age, looted by desperate people seeking wealth in a time of scarcity. During this period, two major centers of power emerged: Heracleopolis in Lower Egypt, and Thebes in Upper Egypt. The rulers of Heracleopolis, known as the 9th and 10th dynasties, controlled the northern regions but struggled to maintain stability. Meanwhile, the rulers of Thebes, representing the 11th dynasty, steadily expanded their influence southward. It was in Thebes that a leader named Mentuhotep II would rise to power and set Egypt on a path toward reunification. Mentuhotep II led a military campaign against the Heracleopolitan rulers, ultimately defeating them and reuniting Egypt around 20. His triumph marked the beginning of the Middle Kingdom, c. 2055, 1650 BCE, a new era of political stability, economic renewal, and cultural resurgence. The Middle Kingdom is often referred to as Egypt's classical age, due to its advancements in governance, literature, and monumental architecture. Unlike the rulers of the Old Kingdom, who had focused heavily on pyramid construction. The Middle Kingdom pharaohs emphasized public works, irrigation projects, and fortifications to strengthen Egypt's infrastructure. These efforts helped stabilize agricultural production and prevent the catastrophic famines that had contributed to the First Intermediate Period. Amenemhat, the founder of the 12th dynasty, moved the capital from Thebes to a new city called Atawe, strategically located near modern-day This move was intended to centralize administration and keep a closer watch on both Upper and Lower Egypt. Under his leadership and that of his successors, Egypt regained its power, extending its control over Nubia in the south, and securing trade routes with the Near East. Trade flourished during the Middle Kingdom, with Egyptian merchants exchanging gold, ivory, incense and exotic goods with civilizations across the ancient world, including Byblos, Punt and Mesopotamia. The importance of the Nile was further emphasized with the construction of canals and reservoirs, ensuring a more reliable water supply for agriculture. The arts and literature also thrived during this period. Some of the most famous texts from ancient Egypt, such as the Tale of Sinuhe, were written during the Middle Kingdom. These literary works reflected the values of loyalty, fate, and the duties of both rulers and citizens. Monumental temples, particularly those dedicated to Amun-Ra, became centers of religious and political power, foreshadowing the growing influence of the Amun priesthood in later centuries. Yet despite the achievements of the Middle Kingdom, cracks began to form in Egypt's political structure. Toward the end of the 12th dynasty, power struggles weakened the central government. The 13th dynasty struggled to maintain the authority established by its predecessors, and Egypt gradually lost control over Nubia and the eastern trade route. Meanwhile, new foreign groups, particularly the Hyksos, began settling in the Nile Delta, setting the stage for one of Egypt's most challenging periods. As the Middle Kingdom declined, Egypt once again found itself vulnerable to external threats. The growing power of the Hyksos in the north, and the resurgence of Nubian influence in the south, foreshadowed the coming of the Second Intermediate Period, a time when foreign rulers would challenge Egypt's sovereignty. As the Middle Kingdom came to an end around 1650 BCE, Egypt once again entered a period of fragmentation and instability. The era known as the Second Intermediate Period, 1650–1550 BCE, was marked by foreign rule, internal strife, and a struggle for dominance between native Egyptian rulers and invading forces. Unlike the First Intermediate Period, where regional rulers fought for control, this time the major challenge came from an external force, the Hyksos, a mysterious people from the east, who established dominance in the Nile Delta. The rise of the Hyksos kingdom. The Hyksos, meaning rulers of foreign lands, were Semitic people who originally migrated to Egypt from the Levant, modern-day Israel, Syria and Lebanon. Initially arriving as traders and mercenaries, the Hyksos gradually gained political influence, taking advantage of Egypt's weakened central government. By the end of the 13th dynasty, the Hyksos had seized power in Lower Egypt, establishing their capital at Avaris in the eastern Nile Delta. The Hyksos introduced new military technologies that revolutionized Egyptian warfare, including the horse-drawn chariot, which allowed for greater speed and mobility in battle. Focused on trade, diplomacy and construction, commissioning the magnificent mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari. Her reign was a time of peace and prosperity, and she famously led an expedition to Punt, bringing back exotic goods like incense, myrrh and rare animals. The warrior pharaoh, often called the Napoleon of ancient Egypt, Thutmose III led 17 military campaigns, expanding Egypt's borders into Canaan, Syria and Nubia. He transformed Egypt into the dominant superpower of the ancient world. His victories were recorded in detailed reliefs at Karnak Temple, showcasing his military genius. The heretic pharaoh, Akhenaten, is one of the most controversial pharaohs in Egyptian history. He abandoned Egypt's traditional polytheistic religion in favor of Atenism, worshipping Aten, the sun disk, as the sole god. He moved the capital to Akhenaten, modern-day Amarna, and commissioned radical new art styles that depicted the royal family in an unusually naturalistic manner. His religious revolution, however,
was deeply unpopular and quickly reversed after his death. Tutankhamun, Akhenaten's son, became pharaoh at just 9 years old. Though his reign was short, he is one of the most famous rulers today, due to the discovery of his intact tomb in 1922 by Howard Carter. His tomb, filled with golden treasures and artifacts, provided invaluable insights into ancient Egyptian burial practices and royal life. Ramses II, also known as Ramses the Great, ruled for 67 years and left behind an astonishing architectural legacy. He constructed the colossal temples of Abu Simbel, expanded Karnak, and commissioned hundreds of statues and monuments. He also fought the famous Battle of Kadesh against the Hittites, leading to the world's first known peace treaty. The decline of the New Kingdom. Despite its military might, the New Kingdom began to weaken toward the end of the 19th. Several factors contributed to its decline: economic strain, costly military campaigns drained Egypt's wealth, foreign invasions, the Sea Peoples, mysterious naval raiders, attacked Egypt's coasts, weakening its defenses. Internal corruption. The growing power of the priests of Amun rivaled that of the pharaoh, creating political instability. The final ruler of the New Kingdom, Ramses XI, struggled to maintain order. By 1070 BCE, Egypt fell into disunity once again, marking the beginning of the Third Intermediate Period. The Golden Age of Egypt had come to an end. But while the power of the pharaohs waned, the legacy of the New Kingdom, its temples, its conquests, and its cultural achievements would endure for millennia. As the New Kingdom came to an end in 1070 BCE, Egypt once again fell into political disunity. The era that followed, known as the Third Intermediate Period, saw Egypt divided between powerful priesthoods, foreign rulers and regional kings. This period marked the beginning of Egypt's gradual decline from a dominant empire to a fragmented land struggling to maintain its former glory. The rise of the priests of Amun. One of the key factors in the weakening of Egypt's central authority was the growing power of the priests of Amun. During the New Kingdom, Thebes had become the religious capital of Egypt, and the high priests of Amun controlled vast amounts of land, wealth and resources. By the end of Ramses XI's reign, the priests in Thebes were essentially ruling Upper Egypt as their own kingdom, separate from the pharaohs ruling from Tanis in the north. Saw Egypt ruled by both kings in Tanis and high priests in Thebes. While these rulers maintained peace, Egypt's influence abroad declined significantly. The once great empire was now confined to its own borders, with Nubia, Libya, and the Levant slipping out of Egyptian control. Egypt had fallen under the influence of Libyan mercenaries, who had long served in its military. The Libyan chieftain Shoshenq I seized power and became pharaoh, establishing a dynasty that ruled Egypt for nearly 2 centuries. Shoshenq I is known for his military campaigns in the Levant, including an invasion of Judah and Israel, which is mentioned in the Bible. He attempted to restore Egypt's prestige, but lacked the resources to sustain long-term dominance. Over time, the Libyan rulers lost control over Lower Egypt, and the country once again became divided among rival factions. The Nubian conquests and the 25th dynasty. As Egypt weakened, a new power was rising to the south. The kingdom of Kush, centered at Napata, had absorbed many Egyptian traditions, including religious beliefs and political structures. Seeing Egypt in decline, the Nubian ruler Pazets, 7047–7116 BCE, led an invasion from the south, capturing Thebes and then conquering all of Egypt. Pazet established the 25th dynasty, which ruled as pharaohs from Thebes. Under Nubian rule, Egypt experienced a brief cultural revival, as these rulers saw themselves as restorers of Egyptian tradition. The famous Temple of Karnak was expanded, and art and architecture flourished. However, this revival was short-lived. To the east, a much greater threat loomed: the mighty Assyrian Empire. The Assyrian invasion and the fall of Thebes. By the late 7th century BCE, the Assyrians under Esarhaddon and Ashurbanipal launched devastating invasions into Egypt. Their powerful armies, armed with iron weapons and siege engines, were unmatched by the Egyptian and Nubian forces. The Assyrians sacked Thebes in 63 BCE, burning its temples and looting its treasure. The Nubian rulers retreated back to Kush, and Egypt fell under the control of the Assyrians, who installed local rulers to govern on their behalf. One of these rulers, Psamtik I, would later unify Egypt once more. The 26th dynasty, Egypt's final renaissance. The 26th dynasty, known as the Scythe period, saw Egypt regain a degree of independence. Psamtik I successfully expelled the remaining Assyrians, and re-established Egypt as a unified state. He rebuilt temples, strengthened trade, and reformed the military. Egypt's last period of greatness under native rulers came during the reign of Necho II, who launched ambitious building projects and attempted to connect the Red Sea to the Mediterranean through a canal. He also expanded Egypt's military but suffered a major defeat against the Babylonians at the Battle of Carchemish. Persian king Cambyses II led an army into Egypt, defeating the Egyptian forces at the Battle of Pelusium. This marked the beginning of Egypt's rule under the Achaemenid Empire, known as the Persian rule was harsh but effective, with Egypt becoming a province of the Persian Empire. The Persians allowed Egyptians to maintain their religious traditions, but imposed heavy taxes and controlled Egypt's economy. The brief Egyptian revolts and the Second Persian conquest, Egypt would briefly regain independence under Emirtaus, c. 404 BCE, the only ruler of the 28th dynasty, but Persian forces soon returned. The 30th dynasty was the last native Egyptian dynasty. Under Nectanebo II, Egypt experienced its final period of independence, but in 3043 BCE the Persians reconquered Egypt, marking the end of native rule. The arrival of Alexander the Great, in 3032 BCE the Persian hold over Egypt would finally break, not by an Egyptian revolt, but by a new conqueror from the west, Alexander the Great. The young Macedonian general, having already defeated the Persian king Darius III, marched into Egypt and was welcomed as a liberator. Alexander was crowned pharaoh in Memphis, recognized as the son of Amun, and honored by the Egyptian priesthood. He founded the city of Alexandria, which would become the cultural and intellectual capital of the Mediterranean world. With his conquest, Egypt entered a new era, the Hellenistic period, ruled by the dynasty of his general Ptolemy, ushering in centuries of Greek influence in the land of the Pharaohs.
The rise of the Ptolemaic dynasty. Following Alexander's death his vast empire was divided among his generals. Egypt was claimed by Ptolemy I Soter, one of Alexander's most trusted commanders. Ptolemy declared himself pharaoh, establishing the Ptolemaic dynasty. Ptolemy and his successors transformed Egypt into a center of learning, culture, and economic power. Under their rule, the city of Alexandria flourished, becoming the intellectual capital of the Mediterranean world. The glories of Alexandria. At the heart of Ptolemaic Egypt was the city of Alexandria, home to two of the most famous landmarks of the ancient world, the Great Library of Alexandria, a vast collection of texts and knowledge, attracting scholars from across the world. The Lighthouse of Alexandria, Pharaohs, one of the seven wonders of the ancient world, guiding sailors safely into the bustling port. Ptolemaic rulers embraced both Greek and Egyptian traditions, presenting themselves as pharaohs while maintaining Hellenistic governance. Greek became the official language of administration, but Egyptian culture remained influential, and the worship of Amun, Isis, and Osiris continued alongside Greek gods such as Zeus and Apollo. The decline of Ptolemaic rule. Despite its initial success, the Ptolemaic dynasty eventually fell into internal conflict, economic troubles, and wars with Rome. Later Ptolemaic rulers became embroiled in dynastic struggles, often leading to violent power shifts and assassination. As Rome's influence grew, Egypt became increasingly dependent on its Western allies. By the time of Ptolemy 1280–51 BCE, Egypt was little more than a client state of Rome, surviving on political alliances rather than military strength. The last pharaoh. Among the last rulers of the Ptolemaic dynasty was Cleopatra VII, 51–30 BCE, one of the most famous figures in Egyptian history. Intelligent, charismatic, and highly skilled in diplomacy, Cleopatra sought to preserve Egypt's independence by forming alliances with powerful Roman leaders. Her most famous relationships included Julius Caesar, with whom she had a son, Caesarion, the supposed heir to both Rome and Egypt; Mark Antony, a Roman general with whom she waged war against Octavian, later Augustus, the future emperor of Rome. Cleopatra and Antony's forces were defeated at the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE, marking the end of Egyptian autonomy. Facing inevitable capture, Cleopatra took her own life, reportedly by allowing an asp, a venomous snake, to bite her. Egypt becomes a Roman province. With Cleopatra's death in 30 BCE, Egypt was officially annexed by Rome. Octavian, now known as Augustus, declared Egypt a Roman province, marking the end of over 3,000 years of pharaonic rule. Egypt's vast grain supplies became crucial to Rome, making it one of the empire's most valuable provinces. Though Egypt was now under Roman control, its culture, religion, and traditions endured. The temples of Isis, Horus, and Osiris remained active, and Egyptian art continued to influence Roman architecture. However, over time, Latin replaced Greek as the official language, and the ancient traditions of Egypt began to fade into history. The legacy of Egypt. Despite its eventual conquest, Egypt's influence never truly disappeared. The knowledge preserved in Alexandria, the art and engineering of the pharaohs, and the religious traditions that shaped ancient beliefs all continued to inspire civilizations for centuries to come. Even today, the pyramids, temples, and hieroglyphic texts stand as a testament to a civilization that spanned millennia. Though Egypt's rule passed from pharaohs to foreign kings, and eventually to emperors, its history remains one of the most fascinating and enduring legacies of the ancient world. With the death of Cleopatra VII in 30 BCE, Egypt's glorious age of the pharaohs had come to an end. No longer an independent kingdom, Egypt became a province of the Roman Empire, ruled not by its own monarchs, but by governors appointed by the Emperor of Rome. Though Egypt remained culturally rich, its role was now largely economic, serving as the breadbasket of Rome, providing grain, textiles, and resources that fueled the Roman Empire. Egypt as a Roman province. Under Augustus, Egypt was placed under strict imperial control. Unlike other Roman provinces, it was directly ruled by the emperor, and Roman citizens were not allowed to enter Egypt without permission. This was due to Egypt's critical role in supplying Rome's grain. Controlling Egypt meant controlling the empire's food supply. The province was administered by a Roman governor, usually from the equestrian class rather than the senatorial class. Roman troops were stationed throughout Egypt to suppress revolts and protect its valuable resources. Though many Egyptians resented their foreign rulers, daily life for the common people remained largely unchanged. Cultural and religious changes. Despite Roman rule, Egyptian traditions persisted. The Roman emperors were depicted as pharaohs in temple reliefs, and the cult of Isis and Osiris remained deeply ingrained in Egyptian society. However, over time, Roman religious practices and Greco-Roman architecture became more prevalent. The construction of new temples and cities followed Roman urban planning, with grand roads, theaters, and forums appearing across Egypt. One of the most profound cultural shifts was the spread of Christianity. Beginning as a small sect in the 1st century CE, Christianity rapidly grew in Egypt, fueled by Alexandria's position as an intellectual hub. The Great Library of Alexandria and its scholars played a key role in theological debates, influencing early Christian doctrine. The rise of Christianity and the decline of paganism. By the 3rd and 4th century CE, Christianity had become a major force in Egypt. The city of Alexandria became a center of early Christian thought, home to influential figures such as Origen and Athanasius. However, the transition from pagan traditions to Christianity was not smooth. Roman emperors such as Diocletian 2084–305 CE persecuted Christians, but the faith continued to spread. The turning point came with the reign of Constantine the Great, 36–30–37 CE, who legalized Christianity with the Edict of Milan 3013 CE, and later converted to Christianity himself. By the time of Theodosius 3079–3095 CE,
Pagan temples were shut down and Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire. The once grand temples of Amun, Isis and Osiris were abandoned or repurposed as churches. The traditional hieroglyphic script gradually fell out of use, replaced by the Greek-influenced Coptic alphabet, which became the script of Egyptian Christians. The division of the Roman Empire and the Byzantine era. In 3095 CE, the Roman Empire was divided into eastern and western halves. Egypt, now part of the Eastern Roman Empire, Byzantine Empire, was ruled from Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul. While the Byzantine emperors continued to rely on Egypt's grain supply, the province suffered from high taxation, religious conflict and economic difficulties. Religious tensions escalated as theological disputes divided Christian sects. The rise of Coptic Christianity, which rejected the authority of the Byzantine Orthodox Church, led to persecution and oppression by the imperial government. The Byzantine emperors often sought to impose their religious doctrines, creating further unrest among the Egyptian population. The Arab conquest of Egypt. By the early 7th century CE, Egypt was a weakened province, plagued by internal religious conflicts and discontent with Byzantine rule. In 6039 CE, an army led by the Muslim general Amr ibn al-As invaded Egypt under the orders of the Caliph Umar. Facing little resistance from the local population, many of whom resented Byzantine rule, the Muslim forces captured Alexandria. This marked the end of Byzantine control and the beginning of Islamic rule in Egypt. The conquest brought major changes to Egypt's governance, language and religion, ushering in a new era that would shape the country's future for centuries to come. With the fall of Byzantine Egypt and the rise of Islam, the last remnants of pharaonic civilization faded into history. Hieroglyphs, once the sacred script of the gods, became unreadable. The last temple devoted to the ancient gods, Philae, was shut down in the 6th century CE. However, Egypt's influence never disappeared. Its architectural wonders, its religious traditions and its contributions to world knowledge continued to inspire civilizations across the globe. Though Egypt had changed hands from pharaohs to Romans to Byzantines to Arabs, its legacy endured as one of the most extraordinary civilizations in human history. Egypt in the Islamic era and beyond. With the Arab conquest of Egypt in 6042 CE, the land of the pharaohs entered a new phase of its long and storied history. No longer under Byzantine rule, Egypt became part of the Islamic Caliphate, governed initially by the Rashidun caliphs, and later by the Umayyad and Abbasid dynasties. This transition brought profound changes to Egypt's culture, religion, governance, and language, transforming it into a key center of the Islamic world. Following the conquest by Amr ibn al-As, Egypt was incorporated into the Islamic Caliphate as a province. The new rulers established Fustat, the first Islamic capital of Egypt, near present-day Cairo. The spread of Islam and Arabic, though initially a minority, the Muslim population gradually grew as Egyptians converted to Islam over the century. Arabic replaced Coptic and Greek as the official administrative language, and over time it became the dominant language spoken in Egypt. Religious tolerance and the jizya tax. Non-Muslims, particularly Coptic Christians, were allowed to practice their faith, but had to pay a special tax known as the jizya. While religious freedoms were maintained, there were periodic tensions and conflict. Economic growth. Egypt remained a key supplier of grain, textiles and trade goods to the Islamic Caliphate, with its position on trade routes connecting Africa, the Middle East and the Mediterranean. The Fatimids transformed Egypt into a cultural and intellectual hub of the Islamic world. Foundation of Cairo. The Fatimid rulers established Cairo as their new capital, which quickly grew into one of the world's most magnificent cities. Al-Azhar University. Founded in 970 CE, Al-Azhar Mosque and University became one of the most prestigious centers of Islamic learning, playing a key role in religious and scientific advancement. Art, science and architecture flourish. The Fatimids encouraged trade, scholarship, and artistic expression, and Cairo became a thriving center for medicine, astronomy and philosophy. Despite their achievements, the Fatimids struggled with internal divisions and external threats. By the late 12th century their rule weakened, paving the way for Saladin and the Ayyubid dynasty. Saladin, Salah al-Din, the founder of the Ayyubid dynasty, overthrew the Fatimids in 1117 CE, and restored Egypt to Sunni Islam. His greatest legacy was his victories against the Crusaders, including the recapture of Jerusalem in 1180. After the decline of the Ayyubid dynasty, Egypt was ruled by the Mamluks, 1250–1517 CE, a powerful class of warrior slaves who seized control and established their own sultanate. Mamluk military dominance. The Mamluks repelled Mongol invasions and halted the advance of the Crusaders, solidifying Egypt's role as a defender of Islam. Economic and cultural prosperity. Cairo became the largest and wealthiest city in the Islamic world, rivaling Baghdad and Constantinople. Flourishing architecture. The Mamluks built elaborate mosques, madrasas, Islamic schools, and palaces, many of which still stand today. The Mamluks remained in power until 1517, when Egypt was conquered by the rising Ottoman Empire. Egypt became a province of the Ottoman Empire, ruled by a governor, Pasha, appointed by the Sultan in Istanbul. While Egypt remained a vital economic and cultural hub, it no longer held political independence. Trade and decline. Egypt's economy flourished through trade, but declined as European maritime powers like Portugal and Spain dominated the Indian Ocean trade route. Local Mamluk influence. Although under Ottoman rule, Egypt was still largely governed by Mamluk elites, who held military and administrative power. By the late 18th century Egypt had grown weaker and more isolated, making it vulnerable to European intervention. In 1798, Napoleon Bonaparte invaded Egypt, seeking to disrupt British trade with India. Though the French occupation lasted only 3 years, it had a profound impact. Discovery of the Rosetta Stone. This crucial artifact, found by Napoleon's scholars, led to the eventual deciphering of Egyptian hieroglyphs. Modernization efforts. The French introduced new administrative, scientific and military ideas, influencing later reforms in Egypt. After the French withdrew, Muhammad Ali Pasha, 1805–1848 CE, seized power and transformed Egypt into a modern state. Military and industrial reforms. Muhammad Ali built a powerful army and navy, introduced factories and modernized agriculture. Expansionism. He launched ambitious campaigns into Sudan, Syria, and Arabia, briefly challenging the Ottoman Empire's dominance. Cultural revival. He encouraged education, printing presses, and the translation of foreign works, bridging the gap between ancient and modern Egypt. From the rise of Islam to the rule of sultans and colonial powers, Egypt evolved through centuries of cultural adaptation, military struggles and intellectual achievement. Even as foreign empires ruled its lands, Egypt remained a center of knowledge, faith and influence in the Islamic world. In the coming centuries, Egypt would face European imperialism, revolutions and modernization, shaping the nation we know today. But through all these changes, the legacy of its ancient civilization, its monuments, and its culture endured, ensuring that Egypt would remain one of the most fascinating and influential nations in world history. Egypt's story is unlike any other, a land of unmatched endurance, where the past and present intertwine in an unbroken chain of civilization. From the unification of the two lands by Narmer, to the pyramids that defied time, from the great pharaohs of the New Kingdom, to the wisdom of the Hellenistic world, and from the conquests of Rome and Islam, to the modernization under Muhammad Ali, Egypt has always been at the center of human history. For over 5,000 years this land has been a cradle of innovation, power and culture, shaping not just its own destiny, but influencing empires far beyond its border. It was here that the first monumental structures were raised, that writing and mathematics were refined, that medicine and astronomy flourished, and that religious and philosophical ideas took root, echoing into the civilizations that followed. Even after facing conquest after conquest, Egypt never lost its essence. It adapted, absorbed, and redefined itself, maintaining its spirit of resilience and reinvention. The sands of time may have buried the temples of Amun and the libraries of Alexandria, but they never erased the stories of those who built them. Egypt's legacy lives on in its monuments, its people, and its influence on the world. Today, Egypt stands as a testament to the endurance of human civilization. The Great Pyramids remain one of the most enduring symbols of human ingenuity. The Nile still flows as the lifeline of the country, and the echoes of the past still resonate in the streets of Cairo, Luxor, and Aswan. Egypt is not just a place of history, it is history itself, living and breathing through the ages. As we look to the future, one thing remains certain: the story of Egypt is far from over. It is a story that continues to unfold, mesmerizing generations to come, just as it has for millennia.